Sherman Butts, the angel. I watched through the waiting room window. The mist kept its distance around Hamish and an elderly man who had the shoulders of a bull. He was bald and carried an injection in one hand, ready to administer, and a book and pencil in the other. Sherman Butts did not appear afraid of the mist. Rather, he looked around at the rolling waves that coiled but kept behind a self-imposed barrier, taking care not to get too close to him. I walked out as Hamish stepped onto the porch. Sherman Butts stopped and looked at me. He gave a swift nod and then ascended the 3 steps. Evening? I'm assuming this is night here, Butts said. He looked up at the ever-present crescent moon that cut across the sky. He scratched his full beard and then pushed his specs up the bridge of his nose. Please come in. The lounge is to the left, I said. Sherman Butts placed the injection flat against his notebook and entered my home. I followed him as he walked into the lounge and sat down, placing his belongings neatly on the table beside him. I sat down, resting my cane against the table to my left. Hamish was already in his usual spot, the skirting above the curtains. His eyes, slits. Sherman Butts' rolled-up sleeves exposed track marks on his forearms. He noticed me watching. He rolled down the sleeves on both arms. That was a long time ago. I carry this now. Butts picked up the injection. As a reminder of what I did. His eyes lowered, sadness filled his face as if thinking about the loss of a loved one. I peered at him, resting my chin in my right hand, my focus fixed. Butts smiled. There you are, I said. His grin widened. That cat said I would not be able to fool you, but I had to try. Butts put the injection back on his notebook. He spent a few seconds aligning it so that it was parallel to his pencil, which in turn was parallel to the side of his notebook. That black sea out there kept away after it saw me holding the injection, ready to squirt. It's got good instincts, whatever it is. It sensed your mindset, and it cannot fathom it, thus it kept away, I said. Butts looked at the fire. Ashamed of what I have become, I must admit, gatekeeper. There is a hint of remorse somewhere deep inside me. It surfaces occasionally, but I'm unsure where it is, as it is fleeting. When did you administer your first injection to an elderly patient? I said. Butts returned his gaze to the fireplace. It was at my first surgery in South Lakeside, a small practice where the majority of my patients were above 60. It was an easy gig, really, not much going on. Didn't have any obscure injuries or illness. It was mainly old-timers who were ready for the afterlife. Butts rubbed his right cheek vigorously. One of my patients was having a hard go of it. Dottie Rayner. She was suffering from crippling arthritis. She was nearly broken. Not from the pain. No, she was used to that. Rather, she had trouble throwing water on her face in the morning without assistance. Butts turned his gaze to me. She lived alone. No kin to come visit her. Only me with my house calls. Butts pressed his thumb through his fingers as if giving an injection. Wednesday evening, after the practice had closed for appointments, I made my way over to her home. She always kept a key in her letterbox. The community was tight-knit, so there wasn't much of a breaking and entering issue. I found Dottie in the lounge. She was sat in the same chair I'd left her in the previous night. Same clothes. She hadn't moved. She couldn't. Dottie looked up at me and told me that she had wet herself. Butts looked down at his hands. It took a while to get her washed and in some dry clothes. She was very frail, so caution had to be taken. Got her back into the other armchair and then made us both a cuppa. Butts looked at the fireplace. She told me that she wanted my help. Put her to sleep so that she'd never wake up. I could do it, she said. It was the highest form of mercy. She could not live like this anymore. I protested, but she was getting worse, and I knew it. Dottie wanted to lie down in her bed, so we both made our way to the bedroom. Fortunately, it was on the same level, so I managed to tuck her in bed and told her that I'd be back the following day. She begged me again to think about what she said. I returned the following day just after 11. The carer had come and gone, and Dottie was downstairs in the lounge watching television. We did not speak. I administered diamorphine into her hand, made her comfortable. Medical-grade heroin did its job, and Dottie never awakened again. She looked peaceful, asleep there. I sat and watched her. I issued the death certificate and amended the records. Nothing came of it. No foul play. It was as if she died in her sleep. Well, she did, and that was because of me. Butts looked up at me. I had found my calling, gatekeeper. He turned to Hamish, who watched him. You know what it is to find a calling, yes? Hamish blinked his eyes. The cat is here to watch over you, gatekeeper. He and one other. I have seen that other place too. I am not sure if it is the place, but rather one of many. Bright lights, lots of souls. Where do they go? You're insightful for a human, but then again, you are no longer one, are you? Butts shook his head. Assisting Dottie didn't come without a price. Nightmares followed with crippling panic attacks. Pethidine was my drug of choice. I could access it easily with writing prescriptions in Dottie's name, and it soothed me. I could see clearly when I injected it, see the wiring beneath the boards. Butts looked at the wall next to him. If I concentrate, I can see the molecules that make this place. He kept staring at the wall. I watched as a few minutes passed. He turned to me. I cannot tell you what this place is made of, gatekeeper. Your home is beyond me. It is not like the world I was a doctor in. After Dottie, I kept my head down. Nothing came of it. Everyone in the community thought it was above board. So I started to pay more home visits. I got to know my patients and take care of them. I could see who needed real help, and those that could get by. I began with another elderly woman, Joan Ramirez. Her husband, Osho, invited me around as she was not feeling too well. He took me upstairs to their bedroom where she looked like death warmed up. The poor thing was suffering from a viral infection. Osho offered to make me a cup of coffee. I could do with some, so I agreed. He went downstairs. I injected diamorphine into the back of Joan's hand. Osho returned with a cup of coffee. We both sat with his wife for a while until she fell asleep. We then went downstairs to his lounge. He couldn't thank me enough. He thought I was a wonderful doctor for coming round all hours of the night and day to check on him and his wife. Others in the community thought so too. This encouraged me. I was doing the right thing. The next morning, Osho called me around as his wife would not awake. I told him that she had passed during the night, peacefully. He was distraught, but I stayed with him to comfort him. Again, I issued the death certificate. I used Joan Ramirez's name to get some more pethidine. God knows I needed it. More pethidine led to more clarity. It was integral to my state of mind. Butts returned his gaze to the flames in the fireplace. I continued assisting the elderly for a while longer, but getting hold of pethidine was becoming a little problematic, so I changed surgery and moved further north. That's where the murderer added to his tally. A voice came from my waiting room. Butts nodded to himself. Can't say I didn't see this coming, he said. Shall we? Bring your belongings. I stood up. Sherman Butts stood up and followed me into the waiting room, which could double for a quaint bedroom with an elderly woman lying in bed. A few seconds later, it changed into another bedroom with another elderly woman in bed. It changed again. Again. Each time with a different elderly woman asleep in a different bed. Again. It was endless. Take a look, Dr. Butts, all your patients. Take a look. Abigail Luton, a middle-aged woman, said. She stared at Dr. Butts. My mother, Lucy Luton. Do you even remember her? She was watching television when you came round one evening. She never left her seat. You called me. I hurried over to find you sat there. Do you remember putting your arm around me and telling me that she died peacefully? What's the matter with you? Sherman Butts looked at the crowd of apparitions forming behind Abigail Luton. It did the same to my grandmother, only I was downstairs. He's evil and he needs to be put down, Timothy Lawrence said, a pencil of a man with spectacles on. More apparitions formed behind Timothy and Abigail. They are all here for you, 146. Do you even have any remorse? She stared at him. Tell us why. Sherman Butts opened his book and showed the drawings inside to Abigail and Timothy. They are always with me. Seeing them here is nothing new. Send him to hell, gatekeeper, Timothy said. Before you decide, I would like to speak on his behalf. An elderly woman walked to Abigail and stood beside her. I'm sorry for what he did to both your kin, Dottie Rayner said. He did me a good deed. He stopped my pain because I asked him to. I'm not sure if that set him off down the wrong road, but there is remorse and mercy in him, gatekeeper. Please bear that in mind before you decide. Perhaps too much mercy, I said. I pointed at the corridor. Your victims will not leave you for a long time. They will find you again where you are going. This way. Sherman Butts looked at the apparitions forming behind Abigail, Timothy, and Dottie. He walked into the corridor and stopped, looking deeper into my home. I watched the apparitions fade. My waiting room changed back to its original state. I strode out. Sherman Butts fell in behind me, and behind him, Hamish followed. Descending 2 flights of stairs, I turned right opposite the translucent barrier that led to the abyss. I strode to the last door on the left and waited as Sherman Butts caught up, still holding his book, pencil, and injection. Hamish followed behind him, stopping a few feet away. I opened the door to reveal a long wooden walkway that was a bridge across an ever-changing tide of grey fog. It looked like the black mist outside my home, only it was grey, and it changed into a stormy sea, then an Arctic blizzard, followed by a desert, and then back to a twisting and coiling grey fog. The bridge led to a port. It had one huge floodlight that illuminated part of it. Apparitions, some dense air, others waif-like, all walked across the bridge towards the port in the distance. Do not fall in, I said to Sherman Butts. He looked at the grey fog that morphed into a desert. What is this place? Checkpoint 13. One of many checkpoints that humans pass through after they die. This one has the longest crossing. A huge wave blew over the bridge. Crash, it sucked away several apparitions that screamed as they fell into the fog below. Be mindful as you cross. If you get there, they are expecting you. Can't you just put me in a cell? Butts said. Checkpoint 13 is not a prison. Dottie Rayner believed there is a hint of redemption in you. You will serve at Checkpoint 13. Perhaps that gleam of redemption might surface and change you. A little, I said. Sherman Butts shook his head. It's that, or I throw you into the fog from which nothing returns. You know the apparitions speak to me all the time, don't you, gatekeeper? I nodded. They will continue to do so, even there, but perhaps as you serve. Slowly, one by one, they will leave you be. Sherman Butts strode across the door and joined the long flyover bridge that linked to Checkpoint 13 at the other end. I closed the door and returned to the lounge where Hamish had a single malt whiskey waiting on my table. I took a sip. Thank you, Hamish. He was sat in his usual spot, on the skirting above the curtain. You might be wondering that Sherman Butts got an easy ride. I can assure you he didn't. He murdered over 146 souls, so he will serve 147 souls, Save them, assist them, do what he must for them to progress. When he has done that, he will be free to leave Checkpoint 13. I will tell you this. Those that work at Checkpoint 13 seldom leave it. You see, wherever human souls go, they create communities, and in those communities you have both decent and underhanded individuals. They bring both joy and hurt to the place in which they dwell. The hurt part will tempt Sherman Butts. He will have to change to progress, or he will fall back into his old ways. If he does that, there is another door waiting for him. One more thing. If you are wondering where Mortimer is, I have sent him back to the Divine Mother's abode to heal. He would not go, but I asked her to instruct him. He would never disobey her instructions. Mortimer is resting, and he will return when he is better. Good night for now. When you are asleep, if you see a blinding light that illuminates a bridge, you are at a checkpoint. Tread carefully and do not fall into the fog below. Stay safe. Godspeed.